Meeting of the Board of Township Trustees of Anderson Township. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Pappas?
Yes.
Mrs. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Girth?
Yes. We are here for the disciplinary appeal hearing to the demotion of firefighter Bill Tillett.
And Tom Allen will be representing the township. He's our labor attorney.
Okay?
Shall we start?
Yeah.
All right. So basically, we're here, I'll be very brief, to discuss whether discipline that was issued to Mr. Tillett as a result of his voluntarily turning in his fire inspection certificate is appropriate. And that's essentially what it is. Would you like me to proceed? All right.
Sure.
Call our first witness. We'll call Mark over. All right. The trustees know who you are, but just for the record, go ahead and get your name in there. All right.
Archie.
All right. How long have you been with the township?
40 years.
Now, do you know why we're here?
Yes, we're here, part of the disciplinary process, following our current collective bargaining agreement, rules, regulations, and policies.
All right. Was there an individual who violated, in your opinion, those rules, regulations, or standard operating procedures?
Yes, Mr. Tillett.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Tillett surrendered his fire inspector certificate.
All right. So that brought about the discipline that they're here challenging today?
Yes.
All right. Who in the township provides fire inspection services?
Anderson Township Fire and Rescue.
How long has Anderson Township Fire and Rescue been doing those fire inspections?
40 years that I'm aware of.
All right, in those 40 years, has any firefighter ever said to you, I am not doing those inspections?
No, there's been no one bringing it to my attention that they're not going to do fire inspection.
Okay. How do firefighters know that they're required to do fire inspection services?
Well, it's part of our job, and part of our culture is to protect and get out and inspect and do fire inspections. And since my existence on our fire department, we've always strived through 5 different either fire marshals or chiefs to continue that trend. And in 1979, the state of Ohio went official with making a fire safety certificate. And since then, all of our firefighters, career and officers have been required to have that.
All right, when you say they made it official, did Ohio pass a statute that requires a certification prior
Yes.
to doing inspection?
Yes, they have that.
All right. Has the township recently raised any money or passed a levy for any department or anything like that?
Yes, in November of 2016, we put a fire levy on. The township allowed that to occur, and it was passed by the community.
What was the reason or how was it sold?
Well, it was to keep the standards the way they are, firefighting standards to keep up with our day-to-day operations and to continue our building inspections to all of our businesses, foster cares, and et cetera, one call.
All right. Now, getting back to the fire inspection, we talked about how firefighters know that they're required to do inspections. In fact, that's listed as an essential function of their job on the job description
Yes,
for both firefighter and lieutenant.
yes, and battalion chief, and currently all of our members, including myself, are fire inspectors, and can and have done inspections.
So if Mr. Tillett and all the other firefighters suddenly said, look, we're not doing fire inspection anymore, we don't think it's necessary, how would the township get that done?
Well, we'd have to look at several options. The first burden would be a great deal of cost if we had to go to the outside or to hire additional personnel. Since we told the public and the board that we were going to maintain our status with the previous levy, for the burden on us.
All right. Would you pay the firefighters any less?
Who do the inspections
Yes.
or they're inspecting now?
The firefighters who currently do the inspection, if they said, we're not going to do inspections, you have to hire someone and pay extra cost, would you in turn have an offsetting reduction in pay for the firefighters?
Right now, we don't have the ability to do that because of the contract, the way it stands.
All right. Kind of wrapping things up, does the township perform inspections just in the township?
To know we are also under contract with the Village of Newtown since January 1st of 2016.
If Mr. Tillett and the other firefighters refuse to perform inspections for the township of Newtown, how would you get the inspections done in Newtown?
It would require us to hire either additional or come up with a alternative method because we're contractually under contract to provide the services.
All right. Now let's change gears and talk about Mr. Tillett. You mentioned very early on that he did something with certification. Tell us how you found out that he no longer had a certification to perform fire inspection services.
His Battalion Chief Smith brought it to my attention officially on April 21st of 2017 that he had received information that Mr. Tillett surrendered or no longer has his fire inspector certificate. At that time, I contacted Assistant Chief Martin, who, like anyone else, can get on the Ohio Division of Public Safety Services website and check verification. All you need is a name, you don't need a social security number. You can just get on there and take a look, and that's when we officially found out that it was surrendered on April 5th.
What did you do next?
Contacted an assistant administrator of HR, Suzanne Parker of the township, and explained that we had a situation we had to start dealing with.
All right. And so how did you start dealing with it?
Following a collective bargaining agreement, we took a look at our options. In and on that date, or soon thereafter, myself and Battalion Chief Smith asked Mr. Tillett if he had surrendered his certificate, just to make sure there wasn't a glitch in the system or anything, and he advised us that he did surrender it, and that he was tired of doing inspections, and he was tired of Battalion Chief Smith constantly badgering him about it.
All right. Before he turned it in, had he notified you or asked you about it?
He had not notified me or asked me about any certification issues.
Do you know if he asked any supervisors prior to that?
No one in fire administration he asked about
All right.
surrender.
So what did you do as a result of that discussion with him, that meeting with him pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement?
We proceeded down following Article 8 of the contract, imposing discipline, starting with a consultation to hear his side of the story, and then begin our disciplinary process.
What was the ultimate result of that process?
The ultimate result was demotion from the rank of lieutenant. Following our guidelines and procedures, our lieutenants are the first line officer at each station. Under our current policies and our company level inspections, our firefighters call our lieutenants first when they run into inspection issues. Each lieutenant at each station is given each year approximately between 100 and 150 inspections to complete, whether he or she goes out and does them or the firefighter medics that work for him are responsible for doing that.
Okay.
We demoted him because he's unable to do that at this time.
All right. The certification process, who pays for whatever, what is required to obtain a fire inspector certification?
Currently, and if we wanted to start with today, we just sent our newest individuals, firefighter 2s and 3s, to meet the requirement to go to 80 hours of training, which we were able to coordinate that here with a local instructor. So we just completed that, rounding off all of our career personnel at this time, except one, with the certification. Prior to that, in 1979, it was 40 hours. Since then, there's been continuing education that's been plugged in that's required to recertify every 3 years. The township does pay for that and provide that. Assistant Chief Martin provides documents for us to review, quizzes for us to take. He just completed a 2017 update of some changes to the code. In 2015, we had some additional training, so we're constantly offering that and paying for that for all our individuals.
This is not something that costs Mr. Tillett anything out of pocket.
No, it's all obtainable on duty.
All right. So he turned his fire inspection certificate in. It cost him nothing to obtain it, and the reason he told you was he was tired of doing inspections.
Yes.
All right, no further questions for this witness.
Thank you all. I'm Steve Lazarus, and I'm here representing the local lieutenant, firefighter 6 Tillett. And I have some questions for the chief. I have some documents that I may be introducing, which I give them to each of you as I go through. Is that the best way? Is that okay? Okay, great.
Sure.
Chief, let's start. I think you indicated that every employee is required, every firefighter is required to maintain this fire inspector certification. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. But then I just heard you toward the end of the direct questioning that you just sent your firefighter 2s and 3s to get this 80-hour training, and that you also have another firefighter who still doesn't have the certification. Which one is it?
Well, the firefighter 2s and 3s, it's in their objective, because we don't put somebody who's on probation through it to save the township money. The only firefighter that doesn't have the certification now is Mr. Tillett.
All right, but firefighter 2s, firefighter 3s are still on probation.
No, firefighter 1s are. Once they come off of probation, if they're not hired in as an inspector, because not all of them are, the ones that are not, we send out for the training.
All right. So in fact, these firefighter 2s and 3s have gone for some time without having the certification. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So they're having non-probationary firefighters who do not have the certification, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And you've still been able to operate the department effectively, correct?
For the most part.
And I think you also stated that lieutenants are given 150 or somewhere around there per year that they're responsible for making sure they get done. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you also said that those can be assigned to themselves. They can be assigned to firefighters. They can be assigned to part-time firefighters, right?
We don't have any part-time firefighters. They're assigned to the lieutenant to make sure they get accomplished. Most of our lieutenants do go out and do the inspections, because we call them company level inspections. That's where there's 2 individuals on a medic unit, 2 individuals on an engine, and it is our goal to get them out so they understand the structures and complete the inspection.
Is there a requirement that the lieutenants do those inspections or simply to get them done?
The requirement is to get the inspections completed, but they're encouraged to go out and do them with their companies. It's called company level inspection. That's what our policy says.
Is there any, in fact, is there any SOGs or policies and procedures that require all members of the department to have a fire safety inspector certification?
Right now in our job descriptions, we have it mentioned that they are required to go out and do the inspections and be part of that program.
Is there a distinction, Chief, between someone who inspects buildings and someone who has a fire safety inspection certification?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, is there a distinction between a firefighter who inspects buildings and a firefighter who has a fire safety inspector certification?
Well, according to the state of Ohio, to inspect a building, you need a certification.
To do a fire safety inspection, you need a certification, right?
And to issue any documentation as a result of that inspection, yes.
I understand. Do you ever inspect a building in a manner that isn't a full fire safety inspection?
Not recently, at my position. But
You could, correct?
Yeah, when called upon, in the the absence of Chief Martin.
Okay, all right.
And we always document when we're out or when we return that we have made that inspection.
All right. So let me show you, let me go through this. Do you have 4 and 3?
4 would be nice.
Okay.
I think Ken would like to look.
Okay, I'll do these, and I'll submit these are job descriptions for lots of different positions. We're not going to have spent a lot of time on this, but first one, this is the job description for firefighter 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why are we doing that?
And I want you to look at the second page there, essential functions, up at the top, see the first one? Inspects buildings for fires and other hazards, right?
Yes.
And makes out necessary reports, obtains compliance, refers violations for further action, okay? So is this, well, let's keep going, all right? And the same, we go for a firefighter 2, which is the next document here. Same essential function of inspecting buildings, right? Okay, so this is, when do you become a firefighter 2? After a year, or what's the,
Completion of probation.
and how long's probation?
It's usually 365 days unless there are issues.
All right, so we got this guy after a year as a firefighter 2, he's got the same essential function, right? Firefighter 3, we have inspecting buildings also, correct?
Yes.
And I think you've indicated that you have had firefighter 1s, 2s, and 3s who do not have the certification, correct?
I know we've hired firefighter 1s, which are probationary, without it because they haven't had a chance to obtain it. Because in our hiring practices, you need a paramedic certification and a firefighting, state of Ohio, firefighting certificate. So we send them as soon as we can, and they're available to get that certification.
Sure, I understand.
Could be a 2, could be a 3.
Could be a 2 or a 3, but in the job, central function, for the 1, 2s, and 3s, it says inspect buildings, correct?
Yes.
All right. Let's go to the 4s, and they have the same language, correct? Under the first essential function.
Yes.
All right. We'll go to the 5s, and they've got the same language.
Yes.
Okay. And then the 6s, this is the top step firefighter, correct?
Yes.
All right. Same, inspect buildings, correct?
Yes.
Then we go to the, want to look at the qualifications at the very end of this. We haven't looked at these, but at the, they all indicate this, but I'm going to just get it before we get to lieutenant. Qualifications, which is the last page of that, anyone firefighter. Okay, you got that?
Yes.
And it says you have to have a valid Ohio driver's license. Everybody, you guys know where I'm at. I'm kind of going through this quickly. Okay. And then certification as an EMT, correct? And then certification as a paramedic, correct?
Yes.
Any specific reference in here to a fire safety inspector certification?
No.
All right. Let's move to lieutenant, which is the next job description. And central functions, again, I think the 4th one down, we have that same language there, inspecting buildings, correct? Correct?
Yes.
All right. Let's look at the end of that lieutenant for the qualifications. We can have the EMT certification, paramedic certification, right? No fire safety inspector certification, do we?
No.
All right. Let's move on to the battalion chief, okay? And under the battalion chief, if you will go to the, these actually are numbers on the pages, let's go to page 6. Under the qualifications for a battalion chief. Okay? Number 5 is the battalion chief specifically required to have a certification as an Ohio fire inspector.
Yes.
That's not found anywhere in the firefighter 1 through 6 or 10. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then we've got another battalion chief in support services, different position, correct?
Yes.
Let's go to page 6 of that position. Also required to have your fire inspector certification, correct?
Yes.
All right. Then we get a third battalion chief in training. Page 6 of that battalion chief's job description, also required to have a fire inspector certification, correct?
Yes.
All right. Let's then go to the 4th battalion chief, life safety division. That's a separate position as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And on page 6, page 7, sorry. Also required to have a fire inspector certification.
Yes.
Okay. And then the assistant chief position. Qualifications for that found on the last page of the assistant chief's job description requires that same certification, correct?
Yes.
All right, and then I think your position, I believe, is the last one here. And we go to the last page of that position, description, you also have to have the fire inspector certification, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, I think you also indicated in your direct exam that if Tillett and the other members of the department refuse to do these inspections, then you have to go outside, or you have to come up with some other process, correct? Right? If everyone in the, yes, okay, if everyone refused to do these, right? But the only person that has dropped their certification is Lieutenant Tillett, correct? Right?
Yes.
All right. How many other firefighters do you have in the department?
Well, we have 60 in the collective bargaining agreement,
All right.
and they're obviously all inspectors.
Okay. So you have 60 people or 59 people that can do these inspections that have this certificate, right? Can you get the inspections done with 59 people instead of 60?
I don't know. Right now, we currently inspected 2,500 times last year, 2,183 businesses. And one of our major concerns is we're an ISO 3, that's Insurance Service Office, and we received 82% of that rating when we were just reviewed in 2014, and we're up for renewal again. Inspections is the second most thing we do in the fire department, second to making EMS calls.
So, do you know when Lieutenant Tillett last signed one of these fire safety inspection reports?
Last records we have, he did the fire station at Station 10 in 2015.
Okay, so he hasn't signed one of these things in 2 years. And your testimony today is you don't know if you can make it going forward if he doesn't do these anymore?
I didn't say that.
All right, well, that's what I just asked you. I said, if you have 59 people instead of 60 available to do these inspections, are you going to be able to get them all done?
We'll work on that.
Under the collective bargaining agreement, Article 29. Article 29. This is firefighter, paramedic licensure, okay? And give you a chance to take a look at that. I'll ask you a couple of questions. All right. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. As a member of the fire department here, you must maintain your firefighter and your paramedic certifications, is that correct?
Yes.
And that's spelled out in this collective bargaining agreement, correct?
Yes.
Is there anywhere in this collective bargaining agreement that requires members to maintain fire safety inspector certification?
No, it's spelled out. Okay.
Well, is it somewhere else in there? I mean, can you point me somewhere in here where it says something like that? You indicated that members of the department, if they weren't doing the service anymore, you couldn't pay them less money because the contract says how much you have to pay, right?
Yes.
All right. And the contract also says that they have to maintain 2 certifications, doesn't it? The determination to demote Lieutenant Till in this case, were you involved in that decision as part of the penalty, or is that?
Yes.
Can you tell us why you believe that demotion is an appropriate penalty in this case?
He is, that position is a supervisor and manages our subordinates and personnel. And with the decision that he made, I made my decision accordingly.
One second. That's all I have. Thank you.
And a little bit more on redirect. Chief, you mentioned that the job description doesn't specifically set forth a requirement that a firefighter obtains a certification to be a fire inspector, correct? Right. But in that job description, is there a provision that says that they have to comply with all state regs that apply to their job?
Yes, the third bullet item.
On every single one of those, it should. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And it is now a state reg that in order to perform those fire safety inspections, they have to have a fire safety inspector license.
That's correct.
All right. You testified earlier that, and there's been a lot of testimony about whether, or questioning about whether, you know, we can even do inspections if Mr. Tillett's not performing inspections. What if he said, I'm tired of fighting fires?
We would be running through the disciplinary process, just like we ran for this.
What if he maintained his firefighter certification and said that? Completely has the ability to do it, just decides, I don't want to do a part of my job.
We would be maintaining the disciplinary process because firefighting is part of the job description.
Isn't that where we still are with this situation? Even if you assume that he doesn't have to have his firefighter inspection certificate and can do that, or hasn't even been doing it, he's literally thumbing his nose at you and saying, I'm not doing part of the job that we've been doing for 40 years. I'm just not doing it.
Yes.
You mentioned an ISO rating. The township has an ISO rating. How does that, kind of fill us in just a little bit on the details. What is the impact of an ISO rating on the average taxpayer in Anderson Township?
Well, currently Anderson is a 3. 1 is the best you can be. And when I first started, Anderson was a 6 or a 7, made it to a 5. Each time we get closer to a 1, it has an effect on the insurance rating system, which eventually provides cheaper rates to not only the homeowners, but to the businesses as well.
All right. And so if you weren't performing any fire inspections at all, what would happen to your ISO rating?
Our rating could go back up, in this particular case, go from a 3 to a 4.
All right. Then the final kind of topic I want to cover with you is, I think you conceded that the contract does not say that firefighters must, CBA, does not say that the firefighters must maintain a certification as a fire safety inspector. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. Now, is there a management rights clause in the contract?
yes,
And does it permit you to direct the workforce, or the township to direct the workforce?
yes,
Unless it's specifically limited, you have all the management rights that an employer has, unless it's specifically restricted to this collective bargaining, right?
yes.
No further.
Couple things, Chief, you're indicating that the state regulations require people to have a certification in order to do fire safety inspections, correct?
Yes,
But not all firefighters have to do fire safety inspections, correct?
well, in Anderson Township, they did, yeah.
Oh, that's to be determined. Are you familiar with the fact that in other jurisdictions, there is additional compensation given to employees who do maintain the fire safety inspection certification?
Not offhand.
Are you familiar with other jurisdictions where not every full-time career firefighter is a fire safety inspector?
No, I've not done the research. I know in my investigations, all the new hires and the chief organization I'm involved in, they're all, most of them are requiring it, or and they utilize it just like we do, so I've never gotten into the dialogue of how many of them do not have it.
All right, so most of them require, but you don't know of all of them?
They haven't done the research.
Yeah, okay. That's all.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions. So at this point, we'd like to call Vicki Earhart, the Township Administrator. Vicki, state your name again, just for the record. Everybody knows who you are, but we'll get it in.
Vicki L. Earhart, the Anderson Township Administrator.
All right, so you've heard the testimony, you know why we're here. Tell us about your involvement in the process of the demotion resulting from the voluntary turning in of a fire inspector's.
Yes, essentially, after Chief Ober administered discipline, Mr. Tillett and the union asked for reconsideration, which Chief Ober sustained his original decision. And then Mr. Tillett appealed to me as is his right through the collective bargaining agreement. I reviewed the case, I had a hearing with Mr. Tillett and the union, and I upheld Chief Ober's discipline, so now we're before the Board of Township Trustees.
All right, so that's kind of the baseline. Tell me a little bit about the levy. We touched on it with the chief. How is that sold here in the township?
Yes, the public safety levy, which was supported by the union, we were pleased by that. It was also supported, the effort, by a lot of local businesses and residents who contributed money to help with campaign materials and other items, signage, that sort of thing, to promote the public safety levy. It was overwhelmingly passed by the voters. And we applaud those business owners who did step forward to contribute dollars, because they were pleased with the services that we provided. We explained that throughout the campaign that we intended to maintain the level of service. We were not looking to add additional firefighters, and I had met with the union and explained that long before we went out for the levy. We were not looking to hire additional people. We were going to maintain the same level of service, which included fire inspections, and that was included in the literature that was provided to the public and to the union.
So fire safety inspections were expressly included in the literature to support this levy.
Yes, and we did frequently talk about the ISO rating and the importance of keeping that as low as possible for cost savings for businesses and residents. We often get calls here at the township from residents that ask what our ISO rating is because their insurance company wants to know that to determine what the rates are. So that was brought up during the levy days.
So, Mr. Tillett, if the other firefighters, for example, were to follow his lead and say, well, the employer can't force me to do an essential function of my job, I'm just not going to do it anymore, that could have a direct impact to taxpayers here in their insurance rates.
I'm gonna, can I, this line of questioning is calling for speculation that's way beyond where we're at right now, saying if everybody, we're here on his decision to drop this, not if all 60 people drop this, we're just not here for that. So, I mean, I think we're getting far afield of what we're here on today.
All right, I'll kind of wrap that one up. If Mr. Tillett turns in his fire certification and is able to achieve that I'm no longer required to do fire safety inspections, is there anything that would prohibit the entire remaining workforce to do so?
I think if that moves through the appeal process and it's upheld that he has the ability to do that, it would have a ripple effect on other members of the department. It certainly, as a lieutenant or former lieutenant, it certainly does not bode well as far as management skills, as far as fiscal responsibility to the township, as far as setting an example for the men that he was leading, and certainly does not set an example as far as the community of what we agreed as a whole to provide to the community, that level of service. It is an essential function of the job. It has been for more than 40 years from what I'm told. I know that I have job descriptions back to the early 90s where it is listed as an essential function of the job. And I think that having rank in the public sector doesn't necessarily bring privilege or perks. It brings a great responsibility to the public that we serve. We're dealing with the lives and property of the business owners and the residents, and I think there's a greater responsibility when you're in that type of position.
Okay. The last thing I want you to do is just verify a few documents that I want to submit to the trustees, so if they have them in front of them, they can use them, rely on them. I'm going to ask you to identify a couple of records. Let me get everyone a copy.
Thank you, sir.
So if you mentioned earlier that you were involved in the appeal process, as this was going through, can you take a look at the documents I've labeled as exhibit one's kind of a chain of internal, I'm sorry, I need to do that. You're going to be do you recognize those documents? And I'll give you a little chance to look at that, of course.
Yes.
So number one, what are those documents?
It's a series of memos and an email outlining the original conduct conference, Chief Ober's decision, and his reconsideration, along with a reconsideration statement from the union, and finally my memo regarding the hearing and my decision.
All right, would you verify those agreements change?
Yeah, I believe
In short?
disciplinary appeal, yes.
Perfect, okay. Were you involved in a meeting with Mr. Till?
Yes.
All right. Tell the trustees what happened at that meeting.
During the grievance, or excuse me, the appeal hearing, there were a number of questions. The union and Mr. Tillett explained what had happened. I asked specifically, said I did not know how to go about voluntarily surrendering a certification. I asked Mr. Tillett if he did. He responded that he initially did not know either, that he researched it through the state of Ohio, and that the process involved writing a letter to the state of Ohio, the Department of Public Safety, I believe, writing a letter explaining that he wished to voluntarily surrender his certification, which originally did not expire until September of this year, and that he had to send in his current fire inspector certification card to the state. I asked for a copy of that letter. He said he didn't think he kept a copy, but he would look on his computer. I have not received anything to date. I asked Mr. Tillett why he took steps to surrender his certification. He asked if he could go off the record. I refused because anything that would be said could be in a public record, which would then be on the record. So I refused. I asked again why he chose to take this step, and his answer was personal reasons. I was hoping that a copy of the letter that he sent to the state would provide a little bit more insight as to why he chose to voluntarily surrender that, but I have not received anything.
All right. Take a look at the next document. Do you recognize that as a position description for firefighter 6?
Yes.
And that's already been introduced by Mr. Lazarus. We've had some testimony about it. That is a true and accurate copy of our position description, correct?
Correct.
And the same thing for number 3. Take a look at that one. Is that the same position description but for lieutenant?
Yes.
All right. And that's a true and accurate copy of our position description.
Yes.
Take a look at item 4. And do you recognize this document?
Yes. This is the only notification that we received from Mr. Tillett. Essentially, this document, which is a greatly enlarged copy of his new certification, was sent to the fire department secretary in an email. This was attached. The only thing in the email in the subject line was "for-line file." So while we did receive a copy of his new card, there was no indication that he had dropped his fire inspection certification, other than the fact that William was at it for another one.
All right. And then the last item is just a copy of the collective bargaining agreement for everyone that we already have. So I have no further questions. We don't share anything else from the trustees.
I just, again, I would like to state that it is an essential function of the job. The fact, opposing counsel brought up that other townships do things differently, or other jurisdictions do things differently. That's not the way Anderson is. For 40 years, we've provided exemplary service for our residents. Our employees, for the most part, go above and beyond. Mr. Tillett's deliberate, purposeful actions to me, dropping part of his essential function of his job and expecting the same rate of pay and the same rank is egregious. It's an insult to the taxpayers. It's an insult to his fellow employees, to the brotherhood within the fire department, that he would feel that he did not have to do those inspections while the men that he supervises did.
Thank you. No further questions.
Nothing?
Our last witness will be Mr. Tillett. Firefighter Tillett. Mr. Tillett, I'll come around to you. Might be a little easier if you don't mind. Or at least spin around this way. So, Mr. Tillett, how long have you been a firefighter?
35 years,
How long have you been doing inspections?
give or take 32,
All right. How many inspections have you done?
couldn't tell you, hundreds, thousands.
Now, we heard testimony that this year you decided to turn in your fire inspector certificate, correct?
Yes.
All right. Why did you do that?
Personal reason.
Okay. You understand that there are implications for doing that, correct?
No. I mean, we're here true. Did I believe when I turned it in that I was required to have it done? I still don't.
All right, you don't think that you're required to do inspections as part of your job?
We do inspections as part of our job, yes.
And have you ever heard of the term essential function of your position?
Throughout this hearing.
Had you ever heard that before?
It's not a term that's thrown around generally, no.
Okay.
I mean, I understand the meaning of it.
Okay. What about fighting fires?
Mhm.
If you got tired of that, do you think you could just say, I'm done?
No,
Why?
it's what we do, it's required, it's in the contract, it's in the job description,
What's in the contract?
that we're required to be certified as firefighters.
Perfect. Keep your certification and still tell your employer that you don't want to fight fires. But you have met the terms of the contract, you kept your certification, so you're good, right?
I never told my employer that I refused to do fire inspections. I've been on fire inspections at the order of the fire chief since I rescinded my certification.
But you
So
know,
that's not a good argument.
but you know that state law requires you to hold that certificate if you do inspections.
I do not believe that.
All right. Well, we can argue that later because it's in the state. Two different provisions of the revised code, and we're not going to argue law here. But, so your personal reason, you didn't think that there was any risk at all to you from a disciplinary standpoint of turning in one of the certifications that the employer sends you to, pays for, and you've been doing for 35 years.
No, I've dropped other certifications.
What are those?
I used to be a special topics instructor for emergency medical services. I didn't enjoy teaching, so I stopped doing that. Over the years, I've been certified in pediatric advanced life support. That expired. I never renewed it. Dozens of others.
Right, where are those in the job description?
Well, which one? Which one do you want to talk about?
Your job description for my lieutenant or firefighter 6, where are those in your essential functions?
The same place that says I have to be a certified fire safety inspector, or not. It's not in there.
There's nothing in there that says you're supposed to do inspections?
There's nothing in there that says, as a certified fire safety inspector, I'm going to conduct fire safety inspections, no.
Okay, take a look at the position description. I think number 3. 2 or 3, both of them have it.
All right.
Is there a bullet in there that talks about performing inspections?
It says, quote, inspect buildings for fire and other hazards, make out necessary reports, obtain compliance or refers violation for further action.
But you're tired of doing inspections,
I
right?
never said that.
Okay, you didn't say
I
what?
did not say I was tired of doing inspections.
All right. And so the reason, I think you give it just personal reasons.
Well, I don't think it's germane. I mean,
Understood, and you don't have to give a reason. I mean, it's something you've done voluntarily, right?
correct.
And you researched it before you did it.
Yeah.
And did you talk to anybody in the administration prior to doing that?
No.
Didn't give them a heads up?
No.
Didn't ask them if they would have any objection?
No.
Did it anybody?
Yeah.
Have you considered turning in your firefighting certification?
No.
Why don't you just turn in the inspection certification after all these years?
Personal reason.
Would you expect a reduction in pay if you no longer had to do inspections?
No.
Would you expect,
Firefighters get extra pay when they become inspectors.
would you expect the township to have to then hire other people to do this? If you and all the other firefighters choose to no longer do inspections?
I can't speak for other firefighters.
You don't know how the township would get it done, obviously.
I can't speak for the administration.
Sure. They wouldn't probably have to hire an outside agency to do this, would they?
In my opinion, no.
Okay, they just would, maybe the chief could do all of them.
Maybe. Yeah, it's a ridiculous line of questioning, so I'm not sure what you want me to say.
If you're not willing to ask for a reduction in pay for not doing that essential function of the job.
I'm going to object to this. There's a labor agreement that sets out the pay, so it's irrelevant and it's not even possible. So, I mean, it's, you know, it doesn't make any sense.
All right, no further questions.
I'll follow my case, chief.
We're done, we've done
Done.
the rest. Thank you.
just going to have Lieutenant Jill answer some questions, and I think that will be it for us, other than for closing comments. Lieutenant, I think you, you've been with Anderson Township for how long?
35 years,
And how long have you been a lieutenant?
about 19.
19 years? Did you receive evaluations over those approximately 19 years you were lieutenant?
Every year except for last year.
Okay. And how would you, can you give me what kind of scores did you receive?
Above average on every single one.
And do you have any disciplines or counselings of record?
None.
Where do you reside?
Anderson Township.
Okay, I want to move into some questions about this. I covered a lot of this with the chief, so I'm going to step down to what we're going to look at. Were you involved in previous negotiations with the township?
Yes.
Right. In fact, there's negotiations going on right now, correct?
Correct, which I am not involved in.
Okay. And let me show you. Where's this last one here? Take a look at that.
Thank you.
Can you tell me what these two documents are? There's 2 pages and that's all, 2 more pages.
The first one is a collective bargaining agreement between the union and the township dated January of '07 to December of '10.
Okay, and then attached to that is this Article 29, we had some discussion about the current contract.
Correct.
Is this language different?
It is.
What's different about it?
This was negotiated in '07. At that time, all fire cars and all fire safety inspector cars were good for life. Once you had one, you were certified forever. So this one reflects only that for the period of the contract, firefighters who are currently certified as paramedics will maintain their paramedic certification and perform as such. And then any additional people will be required to maintain paramedic licensure. Failure to do so would result in discipline up to
So there's nothing in this contract about maintaining a firefighter certification?
There is not.
And if you then look at the next contract, the one from 11 to 13,
Correct.
look at that same section, 29.1, 29.3, is there now a requirement that you maintain a firefighter certification as well as a paramedic?
There is. At the same time, firefighter and fire safety cars became renewable and subject to continuing education requirements. The township negotiated with us, the union, to add in that firefighting cars would be required, and that failure to maintain one would be would be viewed as a resignation if you drop your firefighter car.
Anything about maintaining a fire safety inspector certification?
It was never even brought up during negotiation.
And is there a, what is an SOG?
Standard operating guideline.
Is there any standard operating guideline that requires you to be a fire safety inspector?
There is none.
And we reviewed all these job descriptions before. Do any of them specifically require members to get a going from firefighter 1 to chief? Do any of those require someone to get a fire safety inspector certification?
Yeah, all the chief officer job descriptions, lieutenant chief officer.
And do the job descriptions for the firefighters or lieutenants have that same requirement?
They do not.
Are those job descriptions negotiated with the union? They were not. So management could have put into any one of those job descriptions that firefighters or lieutenants are required to be certified as fire safety inspectors, could they not?
They could have.
Talked a little bit earlier about other contracts. Let me show you a document here. Got a couple pages from a city forest and park fire contract, and then behind that is the Mason fire contract.
Yes.
Is the issue of the fire safety inspector addressed specifically in these contracts?
As I'm glancing through it, it appears that the Forest Park agreement specifies a higher rate of pay for employees who are also fire inspectors.
And that's found on page 47 for that contract.
Correct.
Those that have that certification are paid more than those who do not. Is that correct?
Excuse me a second. Are we discussing, I just want to make sure I follow your questioning here. Now, before you objected to some questions, we're discussing an agreement with Forest Park now? Is that what we're discussing?
This follows up on the questioning of the chief about do other jurisdictions pay additional?
I just want to follow where we're going with this for the sake of following the logic here. So we're now discussing, we're in Anderson Township, but we're going to discuss what they do in Forest Park. Is that correct?
Good, and I'll tell you perfectly. Okay?
Please, thank you.
The argument that has been made is that being a fire safety inspector in Anderson Township is an essential function of the job in Anderson Township. Yet the labor agreement specifically says that you're required to, under potential termination, to maintain 2 certifications, right? In other jurisdictions, this fire safety inspector is specifically identified as a category that receives additional compensation for doing that job. And that is not mentioned in the Anderson Township labor agreement. So that's the purpose of this.
I just wanted to follow you where you were going with this.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. And likewise, in the city of Mason contract, there's additional compensation for certification as a safety inspector. Correct. 3%. And in the negotiations you were involved in, where there were changes to the certification requirements, management never brought up the fire safety inspector certification.
No, they did not.
This demotion that has been served on you, can you tell us what impact that has on your compensation and your career?
There's a 10% reduction in pay off the top. There's a 10% reduction in my retirement, which will affect me for the rest of my life. They've forbidden me from working overtime shifts as a lieutenant, which I've done on a fairly regular basis. So that's additional compensation that I'm no longer getting. So financially, it's been a pretty hard hit.
Okay. And what about anything as far as your interaction with your fellow employees after being a lieutenant for 12 years?
I mean, certainly, it's, 18 years as a lieutenant, most of the people on the department weren't even hired when I was promoted. So now to see me demoted like this and being forced to operate as a firefighter now, yeah, certainly it's been I'm not sure the right word, it's been hard.
I have no further
check with his employer first?
Well, the employer has everything documented in writing. If they wanted me to keep the card, I assume they would put it in writing.
I don't know if that's you or him, or I said who. Who didn't check with their employer first?
Nobody checked with their employer first.
Okay, did you check with your employer? You did? Is that what you're saying?
I did.
Go ahead.
I
What did they
checked
say?
all documents
When-
on the fire department.
That's my question. That's my question.
That is my employer.
When you turned in your certification, which one of these three, for just pick the example, did you talk to before you turned in your certification?
No,
Because you're telling us that you checked with your employer first.
I checked all available documents about my job and my requirements here.
Do you have a
It is
phone?
not stated that I'm required to be one.
Do you have a phone?
I do.
Do you know how to use it?
I do.
Okay, could you have called them?
I could have.
Could you have emailed them?
I could have.
Could you have stuck your head into their office and asked?
Well, we work in the same building, but
Could you have gotten in your car and driven to their building?
I could have.
Why didn't you?
It's not required. There are 100 certifications that people in this department have. I'm certified in road rescue. I'm certified in confined space rescue. I'm certified in CERT. I'm certified in water rescue. If I don't do this, not required to be, it's what I do. They come and they go. I've been certified in many things. The certifications expired. If everybody had every certification and called the fire chief, the stone would never stop it.
And I assume you think you deserve extra pay for each one of those certifications?
I never said that.
Why not? That's what you brought in.
No,
It says we get extra pay for certifications for fire.
First, Forest Park specifically referred to fire safety inspectors. We never said that we deserve more pay. We're simply stating that other jurisdictions specifically mentioned that card. It is well known, it's out there, that fire safety inspector is a separate certification. They put it in their contract. Anderson Township never asked to put it in the contract, whether for pay or not. There's no extra pay for the fire certification that they asked to put in there, but they asked to put it in there because they deemed that certification to be required.
And why do you think they get extra pay for that?
That's what they negotiate with their employer. We get extra pay for other things. It's just a matter of negotiation with their employer.
So you want extra pay? Is that your personal reason?
No, I told them my reason is personal, and it's not germane to these proceedings, regardless of how many times you ask me.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to flesh out. We talk a lot about pay, and everybody else pays more for these things, and if they're not an inspector.
We provided 2 contracts on that. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest everybody else pays more.
All right, Mason and Forest Park. You brought in sections of their contract, and they listed separate additional pay for fire inspector, correct?
They did.
No further question. And we're done unless you want a summation, a short, brief summary. We're happy to do that if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I'd like to get a short oral if that's possible.
I have a couple questions. Do you guys have questions?
I have one or two.
Okay. Well, should we do that first?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Andrew, go ahead.
One of the things, I just want to make sure I have my facts correctly. You've been a firefighter for 35 years, is that correct? Okay. And as a lieutenant, I just have a question. As a lieutenant, how many men usually serve under a lieutenant? 3? Okay. This is a copy of your certification card that you had. Is that correct? You provided us with this?
I'd have to come look if that's okay.
I don't mind. Come on up and look. I don't want to be, I just want to make sure I'm looking at it right. Is that a copy of the certification card that you have?
This is the current one. This is not the one that I had. That's the current one.
This is the current one that
Fire
you
safety
gave.
inspector.
This is not the fire and safety one?
No.
Okay, the fire and safety one that you had, when did it expire? I thought I heard it was good through 17.
That's correct. It's due to expire on my birthday in 2017.
Okay, so it was good, and you did what you had to do to maintain it was nothing, right? You had already completed all the requirements, is that correct?
No, I had not completed the requirements.
Oh, so it was good, but you hadn't completed the requirements, so that's why you gave it up?
The reason is not really important.
I'm just trying to follow if you had a certification card, right? and it was good until 17, but it was good till September of 17. But before that, we're now in, where are we in now, June? And then you gave it up at some point in May? April. So I'm just trying to follow, if you had one, but you then gave it up. I just want to establish the facts so I can make a decision here. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Then, that's the only questions I have.
Dee, do you have any questions?
No, not right now.
Well, one of my questions was, why did she give it back? And I guess she answered it with personal reasons. One of the qualifications for lieutenant is he or she must hold and maintain the following basic qualifications, all state regulations. Is the inspection process in our township governed by the state?
Yes.
Okay.
The certification and the code we follow is the same.
Our state.
Southwestern state.
Okay. If, is part of the lieutenant essential functions, bullet points in this job description, if a lieutenant does not, for instance, do some of these tasks that do not require certification, for instance, if they decide, let's see, let me pick one. Perform physical demanding work while wearing positive pressure breathing equipment with 1.5 inches of water column resistance. I mean, if they refuse to wear that, or if they operate in environments of high noise, poor visibility, limited mobility, if they refuse to, or in enclosed and confined spaces, if they, if they can't operate in those, are those reasons that you might demote or discipline or?
That is correct.
So regardless of, outside of what you're required to do from a state or certification, there's job description items that if a firefighter, or if a lieutenant, I'm sorry, doesn't perform these, then they would go through the same disciplinary process. If they're not following these essential functions.
That is correct.
Not just the state, not just the state certified ones, I mean all of these functions. If they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, regardless if it's a state certification or not, they're not doing it, they would go through this disciplinary process.
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
I'd like to reiterate, I have never refused to do a fire inspection. I have done fire inspections at the order of the fire chief since the part was rescinded. So to say that I'm refusing to do part of my job,
I'm just asking, I'm just trying to understand the process here. I'm not an attorney. It takes me a little while to understand all these things, okay? And then what does a lieutenant make? What's their annual salary? Do you know that offhand?
80,000.
It's in there.
It says 80, right?
Well, I don't know if it says it. It says what a battalion chief, but I don't think I
I
have
think it
the.
was in there. There was a schedule.
We have-
under the contract, we negotiated a reopener that's not part of the CBA. It's about 83.5.
Okay.
83.5 is what
Lieutenant.
a lieutenant makes. Does that sound right? And so, and if I'm reading this, what Mr. Lazarus passed out, a firefighter, inspector, paramedic, lieutenant in Forest Park makes $73,000. So you make about 10 grand more than what a firefighter in Forest Park who has a certification makes.
Correct, and our benefits package is probably.
Okay, all right. And then my final question is to Mr. Tillett. Do you want to work in Anderson Township?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have.
I remembered, if you don't mind, I'd like one other question, or maybe two. Mr. Tillett, this is directed to you. You have been doing inspections, or how long have you been doing inspections before all this came up, before you decided to turn in your car?
Best of my recollection, 1984, I was certified, so since then.
So since '84, you've been doing inspections, no problem, whatever. You might have inspected my business. I've been inspected several times. it's going to get back to the original question, so so since 84, we don't know exactly the number of inspections that he's done, but you've had no problem in 84 on till just this last year doing inspections, right?
I still have no problem doing inspections.
I understand that, but what I'm just, well, theoretically, I mean, what I'm asking is, I think the crux of the thing is your argument. I see where you're going with this, or I see your argument that, you don't think it's required to have the certification. And that's where this whole thing is probably going to hinge on. But since 84, you've been doing inspections under those criteria that you had the card and everything else. Now, I understand now that there's CPEs required to maintain your thing, your certification. How many hours of CPEs is required?
30 every 3 years for inspector and 54 for the firefighting, and that's what they were referencing when the contract, they were showing the 2 different contract changes. Because when that occurred, we put it in the contract and provided assistance to all our department members to maintain it, and have done since.
And these are things that you guys do at the firehouse or wherever you can sit in front of?
They're online.
Yeah, they're online. There's CPEs. You sit there, you're on duty, and you're just taking your CPEs while you're at the firehouse. Is that correct?
It can be, yes.
Okay.
There are other ways to do it, but yes.
Yeah, but-
That's certainly one way you can do it.
Okay. That's pretty much my final question, so thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Did we have the copy of the Ohio Revised, is it in the Ohio Revised Code? Is that somewhere here?
I can give you a citation for it.
Okay.
Yeah, 4765 if I can approach. This is more of a guideline. Let me get this.
Okay, thank you. And then I have another question while you're looking for that. So it was established that you didn't check with Chief Over or Assistant Chief Martin or Mrs. Earhart. Did you check with your union rep or anything before you decided to do this?
I was the president of the union for 18 years. I negotiated or wrote everything that's in the collective bargaining agreement. I've served in every disciplinary hearing for the last 18 years. I didn't really feel there was anybody in the union that was going to be more qualified than myself to know whether or not it was required.
So the answer is no, right? I want to make sure, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're saying no.
No.
And if I can approach, I'll just give you the copies of the pre-inspection inspector.
Thank you.
Josh?
I'm good.
Wow.
Unless the board wants to do anything further, there's a motion to retire to exec session.
Can we,
Oh, you wanted to give something, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah,
You
that's
wanted to
fine.
give a closing, I believe?
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. Basically, we have an employee who is thumbing his nose, not just at the township because of, quote, personal reasons that he's not really share, but he's thumbing his nose at the taxpayers because what he's doing could clearly lead to a slippery slope of, okay, well, you no longer have the right to require firefighters to do inspections. Even though we say, literally, here's an essential function of your position, inspect buildings. Ohio says you have to have a certification to inspect buildings. And he voluntarily turns that in without checking to see whether that could even present some significant problems or result in his discipline. And he chose to do that. And he chose to do that for a specific reason. He's not going to tell us that, but we know that he didn't check with them ahead of time because he knew it was not going to go very well. So what he forgets to understand is that we've got the management rights clause. And the management rights clause in the contract, it says, oh, it's not in there that I'm required to maintain a fire inspector certificate. But he forgets that the management rights clause retains for the township all of the rights to direct the workforce. We get to tell them what they can do, what they have to do. And here, that means inspect. For the state, that means you need an inspection certificate. So he has literally removed the one thing that permitted him to do the inspections that under the contract were permitted to require him to do. That's essentially the situation we're in. We've got to enforce the management rights clause, unfortunately, in this case, because he chose voluntarily to turn in a license that was already fully paid for, had essentially didn't expire until September. This was in April. So we believe that in this case, the motion is appropriate. In fact, I would submit that it could have been a lot worse, given that he can no longer do an essential function of the position he's currently in. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the key documents, I think, in this case are the job description. And we keep getting back to the fact that it's an essential function for a lieutenant, not to do inspections, but to have a fire safety inspection certification. Okay? There has to be a difference between doing inspections and having a fire safety certification. How do we know that? Because these job descriptions make that distinction. Firefighters, lieutenant, say they will do inspections. Deputy chiefs, assistant chief, and chief specifically say they will have fire safety inspection certification. That is not part of firefighter job descriptions or lieutenant job descriptions. These are not negotiated. Township creates these job descriptions on their own, and they chose, for whatever reason, to create different job descriptions for firefighters and lieutenants than they did for the bureau chiefs and up. If they use different words, it's presumed that they have different meanings. Lieutenant Tillett has said, I do inspections. I still inspect buildings after I hear what is called. How does he do that? Well, he does it because he's not doing it as a fire safety inspector. And the state law, two provisions that you've been provided, talk about that if you're going to, if you are going to do fire safety inspections as a fire safety inspector, you have to have a fire safety inspector certification. True. No argument about that. But that's not what he's been doing. You can inspect buildings without doing a fire safety inspector certification type of job. And the chief even said that. I asked him, can you inspect a building and not do a fire safety inspection certification? Yeah, you can. He says, I've done it. It's chief. All right? So this is an important distinction. And, you know, this Lieutenant Tillett's being put out to say, how dare you do something that is inconsistent with the essential function of your job. And it's not in the essential function of the job. It's not there. And more interesting than that, the testimony was clear that firefighter 1s, 2s, and 3s in this department have gone through those periods of time without having a fire safety inspector certification. And guess what? All 3 of those jobs have the exact same language that what we have for Lieutenant Tillett, which is inspect buildings. So why is it that those individuals weren't fired? Because they didn't have an essential function of the job, right? Chief admitted it. He just certified some firefighter 2s and 3s, not probationary firefighters, and yet for 2 years, their essential functions have said, inspect buildings for fire and other hazards, make out necessary reports, obtain compliance. None of them had it. For years. Nobody complained about them not being able to perform the essential functions of their job. Right? So these are job descriptions. You didn't negotiate these. These are ones that management came up with on their own. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe they need to be rewritten. But Lieutenant Tillett's point is, I didn't violate any of the rules and regulations. I didn't violate the job description for a lieutenant. If he had been a bureau chief, if he had been an assistant chief, or if he had been a chief, those descriptions specifically say certification as a fire service instructor and inspector. It's in those job descriptions. There is nothing in the lieutenant job description that requires that certification. Nothing. And yet he's being demoted because he didn't supposedly maintain a central function of his job that isn't in his job. Now, what's more important than these job descriptions is the labor agreement. The labor agreement specifically says these are certifications that you must have to be part of this bargaining unit. You have to maintain your firefighter certification, you must maintain your paramedic certification. Lieutenant Tiltz told you, there are dozens of other certifications out there. Dozens. He's had some of them. He's dropped some of them. Why is this one any different? And the point of bringing these other labor agreements is to show you that people know about this particular fire certification, and some jurisdictions will pay more for it. And what's the implication of that? There's people in those departments that don't have that certification. Does everybody have to have it here? I don't think so. We haven't heard any testimony to suggest that everyone in this department has to have this certification in order for this place to continue to run. Now, you know, the parties are in negotiation now, and, you know, you've been given an implication for management that, well, you should get paid less if you're not going to keep a certification up that, by the way, you don't have to keep up anyway. Well, I would suggest maybe, if this is so important to management, that everybody have this certification, maybe they should pay something to make sure people have it, or at least put it in there in the list of ones that you gotta have, add it to the list. Because if it's not on the list in the labor agreement, it's not in the job description. Lieutenant Zillett says, look, I looked through this, I negotiated this contract, I dropped it here because I don't have to have it. I've dropped other ones. I still inspect buildings since this. I just can't I can't sign the inspection report as a inspector. Can't do that. Okay? So, what he did does not violate the law. The law talks about, in order to do fire safety inspections, you must be a fire safety inspector and have that certification. It doesn't say anything about the law. The state of Ohio says that every firefighter must be a fire safety inspector. It doesn't say that. Read the law. It's not there. Management hasn't even told you that's what it says. Surely, if you want to do fire safety inspections, then you have to have a fire safety inspection certification. Yes. It's not what we're doing. And it's not required under the contract. Management rights clause, to direct the workforce, if the labor agreement sets forth specifications on a particular issue, like what certifications you have to have, management cannot then come in and say, we're going to require that you have other certifications. And I have a case that I will present to you all that addresses this issue. Basically, management kind of said, well, contract doesn't say that we can't do it, so therefore we can do it. It's like, no, you have to negotiate that. If you want to negotiate restrictions that aren't found in the labor agreement in an area that is already addressed in that contract, then you have to negotiate that. You can't just say, well, it says that you get paid $83,000, but it doesn't say I can't take $10,000 of that back from you. It doesn't say that I can't do that, so I'm going to take $10,000 back. That's ridiculous. All right? If you negotiate something back and forth at the table that says that you have to be certified as a firefighter, you have to be certified as a paramedic, and then management leaves the table and says, you got 8 other certifications we're going to make you. That defeats the whole purpose of collective bargaining. You go in and negotiate, and then the next day you say, by the way, yeah, we negotiated, we just had these 2 things, but we're going to add 8 more. Well, should we negotiate? No, we're just adding 8 more. That doesn't make any sense. The state collective bargaining law says that that's wrong. You can't do that. This issue was negotiated in this contract. They even added certifications to the contract in 2011. And if they want to add more, then they need to negotiate. And they're in negotiations right now. But the answer to it isn't to say, how dare this man do something that he's done dozens of other times with other certifications in the past. How dare he do that? Your question you brought up, Mr. Pappas, about, well, it was good till September and you decided to drop it. Nothing in the charges. He hasn't been charged with dropping his card early. There's no charges related to that issue. So, you know, I mean, decided to drop it early. I think he indicated he dropped 1 other in the past. He's let others, dozens of others, expire and not reopen. Okay? So, for those reasons, we would request that you reverse this discipline. It's not appropriate. He was within his rights under current SOGs, which don't address it, under the labor agreement, which specifies 2 certifications, and under the job descriptions, which make a clear distinction between certification and doing inspections. Reverse this discipline, make some changes if you need to, make some changes. But current status of the rules and regulations suggests that he did nothing wrong.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Then I would move that we retire to exec session to consider the discipline or demotion of a public employee or officials permitted by ORC Section 121.22G1.
Second.
Mr. Pappas?
Yes.
Mrs. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garth?
Yes. Thank you, everyone.